Hello again. I just wanted to do a part two on the Book of Mormon geography. Uh, there's just so much, and I love it. I love the topic of it. So just to back up a little bit. So the two main theories now are the Heartland, Great Lakes. That's the same thing, and then the Mesoamerican. In the early 1840s, Joseph Smith was the editor of the Times and Seasons, where we got much of the Doctrine and Covenants and other writings. And he published some articles about a book that he received from a Dr. Bernheisel in New York. I believe he was in New York. And I believe he gave it to Wilford Woodruff. I don't prepare a lot for these videos. It's just from memory. So if I'm off a little bit, please forgive me. But I think it was Wilford coming off a mission. He got the book from Dr. Bernheisel in New York, and he brought the book to Nauvoo and gave it to Joseph. And the book was Stevens and Catherwood. Stevens was the author. Catherwood was the sketch artist who did an exploration down in the Mesoamerica area, and then they published a book. I think it's called Incidents of Travel in Mexico or something like that. Anyway, I have it. It's awesome. It's fascinating. The sketches of Catherwood are just incredible. Copan and Palenque and many of the other ruins down there, and they published this. And Joseph Smith, once he got a copy of it, he said a lot of interesting things, and you can do the research yourself. But he basically said this is good evidence. This is good evidence of the Book of Mormon. The Heartlanders have a little bit of a heartburn over this, and they've explained it away, saying that the articles, even though Joseph Smith was the editor, he was in hiding, and the articles were just signed by editor, not by Joseph Smith. So somebody else was the author of these articles that had an ulterior motive, perhaps. And then the question is then why didn't Joseph Smith correct if it was false, why didn't he correct it? And they have various explanations for that. Rod Meldrum, Jonathan Neville, there's others that are involved in the Heartland Theory, many others, and take a look at it, see what you think. There's one of the big differences is the River Sidon. The River Sidon in the Heartland Theory is the Mississippi. There's probably a couple of different rivers in Guatemala, Mexico region that would be candidates for the River Sidon, which is a big part of the Book of Mormon. A lot of the wars, a lot of the boundaries, a lot of the things revolve around the River Sidon. It could be crossed. It was crossed back and forth several times. Bodies dumped into the River Sidon, emptied into the sea. These kind of things. And I think the river traveled from south to north. The Heartlanders will argue that. So basically, the River Sidon, if it's the Mississippi, it comes out of the Great Lakes and drains into the Gulf of Mexico. That's too far geography to say the bodies went all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, or the bones in the wars or the battles. The rivers in Mexico flow into the Gulf of Mexico, flowing from south to north, basically, and are good candidates for the River Sidon. And they can be crossed on foot, wading, whatnot, animals. So the Mississippi, that'd be pretty hard. So those are just some of the things. I thought it would be good to just go over that. So the times and season articles are really interesting. Also on the church website, they've addressed some issues. You can search it on lds.org, where the Heartlanders got offended because in the history of the saints or the saints, it didn't mention the name Cumorah for the hill Cumorah in upper state New York. And they said that was, the Heartlanders were very upset and saying that the church did that on purpose, the church historians, to push the Mesoamerican thing. And there's an explanation by the church that they did not do that. They just strictly went by the historical evidence that was given to them, that Joseph Smith very, very, very seldom referred to it as the hill Cumorah. Kind of in passing later on he did, but it was a hill of considerable size. It was, a prominent hill. So those are just some interesting things that maybe you'll want to look into if it's of any interest. If it's not, I just ignore these videos. I personally find it fascinating. I love it. If it's old, if it's ancient, I love to study it. Let me just grab a couple of books and show them to you on screen that are great resources for both Heartland and Mesoamerican. Hang on a second. This one here is, I think it's a father-son team, Joseph Allen and Blake Allen, Exploring the Lands of the Book of Mormon. Awesome. Very thick. This is probably the King of Kings as far as the Heartland. Mormon's Codex, Jonathan Sorensen. Another really thick book. Very good. Sometimes a little hard for me to understand, but awesome. I'll show you one other book. This is a great read. It's simple, and it's, I shouldn't say simple, but it's easier for the layperson to understand. Joseph Smith and the Geography of the Book of Mormon by Dr. John L. Lund. I love this book. Very good. Explains a lot of things. I had some other books on the Heartland. I can't find them right now, but I think the main one that they have is right here. It's kind of a large book, but it's the Book of Mormon in the American Heartland, and it's by Rod Meldrum, and I think there's others. Sorry about the glare. Anyway, those are some good resources you can look at if it's of any interest to you. There's dozens and dozens of books on this topic. So if it's of any interest, there's a lot of resources. The Mayan culture is fascinating, both religiously, socially, technologically. I love, it's interesting that the pyramids in Teotihuacan, up by Mexico City, so fascinating because the Pyramid of the Sun, Moon, and whatnot, they're aligned exactly like the pyramids in Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza and the subsequent pyramids with it, aligning with the Belt of Orion. The Pyramid of the Sun has the exact same footprint as the Great Pyramid of Giza. How do you explain all this stuff? This is just fascinating to me. The Book of Mormon was written in Reformed Egyptian. So there is an Egyptian tie. I think next presentation I'm going to talk about rock and roll. I'm going to talk about how it ties into the Book of Mormon. I'm going to talk about how an ancient religion in Babylon ties into the Book of Mormon, and we're going to rock and roll next episode. Love y'all. Bye bye.